said. The maguey was all things to the Mexican Indian Teotihuacan. It was built in the dim and distant past long before the Spaniards, led by Hernando Cortez, came to Mexico. This pyramid is the largest man mound in America, 56 feet smaller, measured around the base than the Great Pyramid of Cheops in Egypt. And men who study history tell us that rope nets and bags were made from the fibers of the maguey plant, and that the countless loads of adobe clay that went into its building. As the Indians had no burros or oxen then, they carried the loads on their backs, just as this man carries his load of alfalfa today.
The story of this strange tower and its companion across the valley is unknown. They are thought to have been built by the Spaniards, but as to their use, no records have been found.
When the Spaniards came to Mexico about 400 years ago, they used Indian labor to build this aqueduct. It was built to carry water across the deep valley to the little town of Los Remedios. The Indians, before the Spaniards came, did not have any horses or cattle or sheep or goats or hogs or dogs or cats, and they had no burros and no oxen. The Spaniards brought all these animals to Mexico. And so by the time of the building of this aqueduct, there were oxen to drag crude sleds and draw carts with large wooden wheels. Rope, made from the fibers of the maguey plant, was a very important tool in all this activity. It was used to tie the ox bows to the heads of the oxen, to lift the stones into place, and to tie the smaller stones on the backs of the burros, just as these Indians today tied their loads of wood on the backs of their burros. The village of Santa Rosa, with its narrow, cobbled streets, lies on the side of a mountain above the Santa Rosa Valley. It is the beginning of the rainy season now, and on this Sunday morning, services have been held in the church at the bottom of the hill. Prayers have been offered, asking for plenty of rain for the growing crops. Homemade skyrocket bombs have been bursting in the air all morning, and the blue haze of their smoke still lingers in the sky. The band has held a concert in the churchyard. Now the services are over, and the band toils slowly up the hill, escorted, of course, by nearly all the children of the village. During the week, these people work hard, men, women, and children. But on Sunday, they go to church and to friendly family gatherings such as this at the home of the alcalde, or mayor, of the little village of Santa Rosa. Here, many families gather for lunch, afternoon, and evening. The children play, the women prepare the food and chat about the weekly happenings, the men rest and talk of the crops, and perhaps drink a little homemade pulque, which has been made from the juice of the maguey plant. In the country districts of Mexico, it is rare indeed for the people to actually live on their farms as they do in the United States. For countless centuries, they have built their homes in villages such as Santa Rosa and gone out each day to work in the fields. The home of the alcalde overlooks the entire Santa Rosa Valley, and one of the most important uses of the maguey plant is shown here, where it is used as fencing. Planted close together along the edges of the fields, the huge thorny leaves soon become very dense and thick. Thus, not only domestic animals, but the wild deer from the mountains as well are kept from eating the crops. The farms are small, and in most cases each family owns only one. To get the greatest harvest possible, it is important that none of the crops be eaten or destroyed by grazing animals. The products of the maguey plant are very important to the Mexican people. To supply this need, there are, of course, many great maguey plantations, but fortunately for the Indian, the plant grows wild all over the country. In the mountains, in the deserts, and along the roadsides, the plant and all it gives are free for the taking. Getting the juice from the maguey plant for the making of pulque is a very simple process. It's scraped in the bottom of a leaf, a little pool forms, and the man returns each morning and evening, and the juice is sucked into a gourd, which is emptied into a pigskin carried on the back and taken home. A crude paper can be peeled directly from the leaf. The pulp of the leaf can be cooked and rolled or beaten into a fine parchment. For needle and thread, the ancient tribes used the thorn at the tip of the leaf for the needle and the attached fibers for the thread. It is still used today for coarse work, such as mending harness and blankets and serapes. Rope, made from the fibers of the Maguey plant, is probably the most important manufactured product in all of Mexico. Commercially, it is a tremendous industry. Billions of pesos are invested in huge plantations and modern machinery. But as for the Indian, he still makes his rope in the ancient and primitive ways of his forefathers. Armando Martinez, an Aztec Indian, holds a Maguey leaf over a stone and beats it with a club to loosen the pulp and expose the fibers. And then with a stick, which is curved to prevent it turning in his hands, the pulp is gradually forced out, and the long, tough fibers are left. The pulp, which lathers in water, is saved and used as soap. In the yard of his adobe home, the fibers are allowed to dry for a few hours in the sun. In the English language, these fibers have many names, among them being sisal, sisal hemp, and henequen. When dry, Senor Martinez feeds the fibers into the slowly forming cord as his son, Fernando, turns a crank to which the cord is attached. The feeding of the fibers is a very important part of the process. The cord must be of uniform thickness to produce a smooth, even rope. When the cord is finished, it is doubled at the center, and this center point is then attached to the crank, and the doubled cord is twisted into a strand. 4 of these strands are made, and then they're attached to the ends of 4 small tree branches thrust through holes in a post. A board with 4 holes completes this primitive device, and as the board moves round and round, each strand is twisted separately. The other ends of the strands are attached to a hand crank slipped through a hole in a post. This post is mounted on a log which drags along the ground as the rope becomes shorter due to the twisting. Senor Martinez holds the strands apart with his left hand, and in his right holds a block of wood with grooves for each strand. This block he holds back tightly against the slowly forming rope. The result is a tightly twisted rope, strong and good for many years of service. When all the leaves have been harvested, the trunks or bolls of the plants are loaded into ox carts and brought to this primitive factory where industrial alcohol is made. The bolls are split into pieces so they will bake more easily. Then they are stacked around the rim of a pit in which stones are heating from a wood fire underneath them. When the stones are red hot, the split maguey is piled around the stones and then covered with broken up tree branches and dried leaves and left to bake overnight. It is 9:30 the next morning now, according to this homemade sundial, which is the clock of the Indians. The men have just about finished removing the covering to get out the baked maguey. It is a rich brown in color after baking and looks and tastes about like cooked sweet potatoes. When baked at home in a small fire, not only the bowl, but the leaves and the roots as well make a very fine and nutritious food. The baked maguey is taken to a saucer-like pit lined with stones, and the juices are crushed out. Small factories such as this help to supply the tremendous demand for industrial alcohol, which is needed in the making of paint, shellac, perfumes, flavoring extracts, celluloid, rubbing alcohol, and countless other products. Through holes left between the stones and the bottom of the pit, the juice trickles into an underground clay pipe, which leads to a crude still. Here, by distilling, industrial alcohol is made. As far back as history can be traced, the maguey plant has been an indispensable part of Mexican life. This was true long before the Spaniards came, and it is still true today. Beside their other uses, some leaves are cut and dried and used as roofs on the more humble dwellings. Coarse threads are made from the younger plants. The roots are dug and cooked for food. And then there are the fences between the fields and along the roadsides. There is pulque and paper and needle and thread and soap and rope and industrial alcohol. Is it any wonder that to the people of Mexico, the maguey is the plant of 1,000 uses?